out trying to clear the roads, get some salt down. But because this fleet stayed longer, we have much icier roads than originally expected.
Icy roads are the problem. Traffic is barely crawling across parts of Mississippi. Republican Senator Rand Paul says President-elect Trump fully supports repealing the president's health care law only when there's an alternative. This is AP Radio News. It is Wild Card Weekend in the NFL.
Station 820 AM WCPT Willow Springs and 92.5 WCPT FM DeKalb, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
It's a time to arm yourself with facts.
You're staticky.
I am? Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I'm
Well, hello to you, too.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Trying to think of...
Wow. It sounds like farts noises now.
Oh, thanks. That's lovely.
Okay.
Things are back to normal.
There you go.
Things are back to normal is what you're saying. Is that better?
Yeah, much better. Yes.
Okay, so it's the power on this guy. Okay. Alrighty. Let's see how I can solve that really quickly. How much time we got? We got a couple minutes. Okay, I think I can put another power source on this thing so I'm not getting 60 cycle hum or whatever that was.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. Did that, is there any excess static? Static.
No static.
Excellent. Okay, so that's a result. I think when we get it, it may perhaps be a result of the power cable going into the iPod Touch that runs the Tieline app. We will just take that as a possibility and move on.
$30 seconds.
Cool. By the way, hi chat room.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum. Things are going to start happening to me now.
Live exclusively for WCPT AM and FM in Chicago and streaming worldwide at chicagosprogressivetalk.com. Standing up and speaking out, here's Hal Sparks.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Goodbye.
So many of us, welcome to the show, by the way. Many of us have, over the last, I guess, month and a half, even, dare I say, the last 15 months or so, have been looking at the election cycle, looking at the all the media rigmarole and the messaging and the polling and the Trumpisms and the crowd around him and the white supremacists and the alt-right and the SJWs and this all this talk of both sides do it and the divided nation and all this, and you start getting in this situation where you think the camps are evenly distributed. It is clear what is going on in the United States. We have clearly this group against that group most of the time. It's with rare exception. And then right when I think you've settled into some level of expectation of what the new normal will be, you have Republicans divided over whether or not their president, and he is wholly and completely theirs, kids, is under the thumb of Russia, and to what extent. That the John McCains and the Lindsey Grahams of the world are very aware and have spoken out very distinctly about the effect that the Russians have had on our election and the manipulation, and worldwide, by the way, we're not the only election they're doing. They're messing with. That they have an inherent desire and a strategic desire, by the way. It is not... there is no curiosity as to why the Russians would want Donald Trump in office or any particular right-wing or authoritarian governing philosophy in a particular country, even if they disagree vehemently with that, if they think it will do more to sabotage the country that's in question than actually having a legit working, functioning government. The ultimate goal of Russia, as much as anybody will tell you, was not and has never been the election of Donald Trump. That is a tactical element of the strategy. It is not the strategy itself. The strategy itself is to undermine the watchdog capabilities and the moral authority what we have in the United States as a democracy. And to specifically, and this isn't just my conjecture on this, the CIA report itself says that the goal overall in electing Trump was to undermine faith in and the effectiveness of the American democracy. Why would one want to do that? There are many reasons, not the least of which is our strategic differences in Syria, that this is effectively an old-fashioned Cold War propaganda tactic to manipulate a region of the world that we're in a proxy war with Russia over. And so the assistance in installing a fascistic leader, an activity, by the way, that the CIA itself has been accused of, and rightly so, in other countries all over the world, should come as no surprise that other countries have understood that we are no more immune to the ability to do that than any other country, and that we strategically serve a purpose for Russia when we are scrambling to pick up the pieces of our democracy, when we are not a cohesive, united country, when we look past our differences and move towards a more wholly unified and American vision, a genuine democracy that respects and resolves to respect the voices of even those we disagree with, because that's how democracies function. That a functioning democracy is not just the bane of oligarchs and the undermining of our strategic position economically, or as a moral authority, or in our involvement in the UN, or in our Middle Eastern policy, but overall as a force in all those areas. And to help install someone like Donald Trump during an election cycle, which was ripe for this kind of manipulation, considering the fact that the United States itself found that it had two of the least popular candidates running in modern history. So the ability to tip the scales of the election, not by physical manipulation, although there may ultimately be signs of that, and I don't expect any genuine study to be done or investigation to be done about those kind of things. Just kind of write it off as the price of doing business in this circumstance, which gets weirder all the time. But in the fact that you have two very unpopular candidates and two political parties, which, for all the wailing and gnashing of teeth about the only having a two-party system in the United States, both parties have subdivided into two warring factions in some ways. And over the course of, call it over the course of the last 15 years, since the Iraq War, since post 9/11, in the rush to panic about 9/11 in the political sphere, and how to maintain power in the face of popular panic about that event, there has been a vast separation between what people view as the elite or the establishment, as if those two things are the same, and they are not. We'll get to that. But there is also a separation between the moral directive or social directive groups and the legal directive groups within both parties. Now, I was just made aware of a study. I think it was done by the Toronto's sociology department, and they did this massive study about the rise of the authoritarian right and the authoritarian left. Is there a comparison to be made between the hyper right-wing authoritarians and the hyper left-wing authoritarians, and how they use language and how they direct people and how they manipulate the political arena using words and strategies beyond just a true believer level, where they go, this is what I truly believe and I will stand by those values to my dying day. This idea that, well, if I'm either emotionally or philosophically or biblically manipulative with what I'm saying, even though I may not participate in that behavior or buy into it, they use those technologies, those linguistic technologies, to control their base, to direct their base. I think control is too big a word, actually. So in this study, they found that there are that left-wing extremists and right-wing extremists appeal to a certain section of their base that are using specific techniques in how they converse about issues that are intentionally manipulative and work on the fact that the people they are trying to reach have a limited vocabulary. They have low, they have, not only do they have low cognitive skills, but beyond that, they have an inability to articulate the most difficult ideas that they hold. So the more entrenched the idea, the more difficulty these people have in actually expressing it. And it creates this frustration and this sort of internalized rage. That's what makes these two groups fiery and vitriolic in their political discourse. What they did notice was the difference, and I want you to think about this during the break, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about Russia's influence in the United States beyond just the political sphere. What they did find out is that left-wing extremists and right-wing extremists differ in one particular element. They both believe in a unifying vision of society. Both groups believe in an idea of a one-thought system. However, the left wing does it through forced homogeny. The idea that if you want to be part of the group, you have to think and talk like we all talk. And if you don't, we will sort of verbally gang up on you and until you acquiesce. And this is what we would call kind of left-wing cyberbullying, when people differ about an idea, or somebody who an ally who gets jumped on Twitter because they say the wrong thing or what they say is misconstrued, and they run it. The other side, the right wing, focuses on their unifying view of what society is, but you have to pass a purity test with them. So it's homogeny or purity, left to right. Left homogeny, we all need to start behaving by the same set of rules. Right, you must intrinsically belong to this group or pass a purity test to get in. Now, you can say that that's just a minor linguistic difference, but it makes a huge difference when you're expressing how right-wing and left-wing groups act out at their most extreme, from communism to I guess, Nazism at the other end. And I would rather, obviously, deal with a group that believes in a level of homogeny, because at least there's an element of free speech and the ability to hash things out, whereas purity is exclusion in its cleanest form. We must cut resources from, and you will see the difference in governing between these two crowds in fits and starts by how the Republicans will act now that they have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Because when the Democrats got into office and had everything, what they enforced as their political will was insurance for everyone. The ability for everyone to have insurance. And what Republicans will do is eliminate that insurance for people and build a wall. Nothing is a more clear definition of the two political philosophies at their most extreme than the institution of Obamacare and the building of a wall. We'll be back. It's the House Parts Radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT820.com. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Hal,
Yeah.
earlier you were like in and out,
Oh.
but then somehow you stayed on. I don't know if you did something.
I did not do anything.
'Cause I know I didn't do anything.
Nope, I didn't do anything.
Okay.
So, fingers crossed, it
Okay.
was just an internet glitchiness. Yeah.
Okay. All right, good.
That's right. Cool. Fingers crossed. Yeah, John. The difference in the purity test of the left is this overwhelming sort of what I would call the vicious inclusion of the left. We will shame you into acting in our we will shame you into acting the way we want you to act. And in terms of that, there is still the opportunity for you to join. Sorry for the audio video off sync because I was just in the break. Yeah, and everybody who's joined us, hello, what's happening? That there is still an inherent inclusion in left-wing extremism, with rare exception. There's obviously, we have our differences of thought about that. I think that the
30 seconds.
Oops, I'm typing on the wrong keyboard. That happens a lot. Why was there no challenge to the electoral results? because we have 200 plus years of peaceful exchange of power, and the tide towards normalcy is very overwhelming for a lot of people. That
This is Tom Hartman, and you're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT.
So the debate rages on about how divided we are as a country. That there are, the right-wing Christians and the Ken Hams of the world, the people who intrinsically believe that, they want to be an ally to Israel more than almost any other political force in the entire world, largely so that biblical prophecy can play out and most of the citizens of Israel, specifically the Jewish ones, will get their throats slit on the day of reckoning, the day before Armageddon comes. So there's this kind of duplicitous, oddly, it goes with the whole idea of being pro-life and pro-death penalty. That, that somehow eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, as opposed to a mitigatory limiting statement, is actually an excuse for capital punishment. And thou shalt not kill is really thou shalt not murder. And the playing about of, the more pure they read into this, the more absurd the argument gets. That there is a value to effectively watering down your philosophy because you recognize you're involved with other human beings and your own shortcomings, and that requires a certain amount of self-dissection, psychologically. And in the age of selfies and the narcissistic Twitter machine, that there is a huge element. The huge sort of psychological wave that people are dealing with that says, my self-importance within the sphere of social media is indicative of my identity, and so therefore is the identity of everyone I come across. So if someone disagrees with me, that is an affront to my identity, not a differing opinion. That social media in and of itself is a prime directive on of the human psyche. That when you look at how people converse online, that if someone says something people disagree with, even if they're almost even if they're aware that it's out of context, if it gives them an excuse to assert their own ego, they will take that opportunity at the detriment of someone else's life, career, standing, all that. And any philosophy taken literally, it reaches this kind of ad absurdum level that is very dangerous at its root because of its exclusory nature. Now again, progressives and liberals, especially classic liberals, which interestingly enough, there was an article about people being more comfortable with the word liberal again, which I think is great. The idea that when people are speaking online, when they're discussing things online, that their identity is so entwined in their online identity, when it is clearly not. It is just as much a face or a front as any outfit you would put on, and is no more indicative of your actual day than if someone popped in, looked at you for 2 seconds every 9 hours and made a decision about your character based on that randomness. It's and Billy in our chat room saying, say it everybody, liberal. Yeah, it's a nice word. It's got and since we're a liberal democracy, there's a lot of history that goes with it. It's nice to be to stand proud on that word. I have no problem whatsoever with that. So that being said, there is an illusion that because you would be honest and forthcoming and genuine and philosophically direct over the course of your when you're tweeting or when you're blogging or when you are interacting with people on Facebook or commenting on things, that this is your wholehearted response to something. That if you see something that you are offended by, or are, that you see as damaging or dangerous as a philosophy, and you need and feel the right and the responsibility to respond to that, what you end up doing is, on some psychological level, most people do this, is they believe that everyone else believes what they are saying equally. So the more, and you become less aware of sarcasm, you become less aware of joking, your ability to parse honest language versus versus jokes, quite frankly, lessens psychologically because you enter into a defensive stance. And this happens increasingly in social media. And I would warn people to guard against it. That when you find yourself getting too wrapped up in a conversation, it is a good idea to remind yourself that you have no idea who you're talking to most of the time online, or who is saying what most of the time. This is less about Trump's tweets, which I think are indicative of who he is, and more indicative of the some abstract, what I would call social justice warrior accounts online, some abstract right-wing pro-Trump social media accounts online, which were part of the Russian propaganda machine. What was part of the findings of the CIA and the DNI was that the propaganda manipulation came in effectively two directions. That there were two basic elements that they used as the strongest arm. One was fake news. People in Macedonia, making $60,000 a year, making up phony news stories like their own kind of one-person Inquirer. One guy who literally created, clickbait anti-Clinton stories because there was enough of a segment of the populace that wanted to believe and read these things. They wanted to believe them so badly that they would click on them and he would automatically get advertising dollars from people looking at these things. The other side is false infighting between artificial social media accounts. That it is one of the simplest things you can do, and this is one of the reasons why they call it trolling. I think there's a lot of people who believe that trolling is sort of is in reference to hiding under a bridge, a troll, a literal, from literature, the concept of a troll, a monster that hides under a bridge that messes with everybody who tries to just cross the bridge, and there's an element for that. I think, quite frankly, that this version of it has a lot more to do with a form of fishing called trawling, where you literally just throw your hooks out the back and see who gets snagged by it. Who takes the bait? And again, one of the ways you help our democracy function is, and we'll be back right after this, we've got to take a break. One of the ways you help our democracy function fully is you vote every 2 years, not every 4, and you don't take the bait. We talked about getting offended on here and understanding that every time you do that, you give it's fuel to their fire. What they're doing is working because the goal is not to actually make you change your mind. They're very aware that the chances of you actually changing your mind based on what you're seeing are very slim. But what they can do is get you in a fighting stance with people who are just political adversaries and create opponents, villains, evil. And through that bifurcation of the American electorate into warring factions as opposed to disagreeing factions, they do an end run around our political process and undermine our belief in our democracy. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. We're streaming on YouTube right now. Join us. Yeah. John, you and Lisa Ann are making some really great points. Julie, I'll run for office when I'm slightly older. That's another. I think I have to be completely silver to run for office. Otherwise, as a comedian, no one will take me seriously. I have a strategy I employ when I'm dealing with people online who specifically seem like I'm on the same side as them, and yet they manage somehow to pick a fight with me. That to an extraordinary level. I feel like it's my responsibility at that point to, at least for my own sanity, pretend for a moment that everything I believe about them, like think for a second, anyways, not pretend really, but think for a second that what I might believe about them may not be based on facts. That the Twitter handle I am talking to is not actually somebody who believes what they're saying, but is manipulating all those. They are political activists or spoilers or trolls or people just looking to mess with everybody. And I think that's important to see. I think that's an important element. There is, for a lot of people, the belief somehow that this is who they're talking to is just as much a true believer as they are is one of the great fallacies. That the person you're talking to actually gives a shit is the hard part. Oh, I see. I know where there's an echo. Sorry, 1 second. Built-in audio response. Check. Maybe
1 minute.
Thanks. Is the echo gone? Is that better sonically? I think there was a double sound thing going in. Might be a little quieter, but hopefully it works.
No
20 seconds.
Thank you.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back. So an indicative of the 24-hour news cycle phenomenon that we have been dealing with for the last.
The holidays may be over, but if you hurry.
Beg your pardon. That is that's a good old-fashioned pop-up ad. That's very loud. Beg your pardon. The holidays are over, actually. The belief somehow in the news world is that attention equals legitimacy. This is the problem of 24-hour news. This is the essence of the limitations of 24-hour news. In that, if enough people are paying attention to a thing, that somehow that democratically creates a legitimacy for it. That it is, I would almost call it the Comic-Conning of news. That if enough people like it, even if that enough people is a minor amount, because the number of people, as far as people with televisions in the United States versus people with televisions who watch a news channel with any regularity is an incredible drop-off. And by the way, I believe it kind of should be that way. I don't think news should go for ratings. I think it's a mistake to actually even rate news programs, except in trustworthiness, not eyeballs. Because eyeballs don't actually go to news most of the time. Eyeballs don't actually chase the answers. That's why there's so many fire stories on the news. And slow speed car chases. Because they're engrossing and full of room for speculation in the eye and mind of the viewer. But their legitimacy as a news story is absurd. They actually have no value unless I've always said that. Whenever you hear a story about a building fire in the news, the reason you heard about it in the news is because no one was harmed in it, and you haven't been informed by a family member or a friend or someone nearby that could make you aware of it. And the only thing that makes it news, technically speaking, is if the fire itself was caused by some element that is common in buildings and it may be germane to you. That's technically what makes it news. Otherwise, it's an event. It may be sad, it may be happy, it may be important, it may, as far as the people directly attached to it. But in terms of its worth in your life and its ability to direct any action on your part, it's not news. And when we deal with political issues, a lot of it is news. A tremendous amount of news that is political in nature, that has a direct effect. The contents of the Affordable Care Act, for example, is news. It's really important news, especially if you have a pre-existing condition or your children are in college and can't afford health insurance on their own and you need them to stay on your plan, or if your child was born with a birth defect and will at some point outlive the cap on their insurance, or or care about anyone in the entire country, whether you're connected to them or not, that will be affected by. That is news. But in terms of a 24-hour news cycle, it's a yawner compared to a slow-speed car chase or a fire. So 24-hour news is now 24-hour spectacle because of that. And has been since, the mid-90s, arguably, before CNN, the chicken noodle network, went to war with Fox News, and it's all ancillary, spreading voices. So as we, look at contextually, especially over the next, because there's going to be some very important news coming out of the actions of the Trump White House and the damage done by him and his attempt to do some face saving at certain times, which will result in accidentally good policy. That the details of which are important are news. And if we in looking at how social media manipulation and fake news affected the outcome of this election, and in this CIA report that came out this week, it is abundantly clear that is exactly what happened. But it would not have worked had there not been two elements teeing it up and making it work. Fake news being typed up by somebody in Russia or Macedonia is simply that until it is retweeted or reposted or liked or passed on as genuine. Or, quite frankly, because eyeballs, whether they agree or disagree, are viewed as evidence of worth in social media and on the news, that if enough people are in an uproar over something that is nonsense, its amount of people passing it on who also think it's awful will give it enough room to get a platform. And at one point, there was this, in the debate over Simon & Schuster giving Milo Yiannopoulos a book deal, which is not surprising at all from a financial standpoint. He's got an audience. They've run the numbers. Enough of them will buy the book to warrant the 12% of what they're going to make on the book, paying him in an advance. It's normal business as usual. It should not surprise anyone that a publisher gave this guy a book deal. But in the idea about platforming those ideas and giving them a voice, Oprah was quoted as saying, at one point I thought I could bring on neo-Nazis and KKK people and have a debate with them and kind of undercut their ideas when I realized I was just handing a platform to them. In my attempt to debate them, in my attempt to create a situation where I could call them out for what was false or belittling or wrong or just evil about what they were saying, I was literally just giving them, elevating them. And in creating and insisting upon offense-based disgust at certain people's behavior and the initiation of using social media as an expression tool for that, we are basically in some cases committing the same baseline acts as the 24-hour news cycle, in that if I give it attention, I need to show people how awful it is, but the fact that I'm giving it any attention at all legitimizes it in the mind of other people. Do you ignore it all? No. But what you can do is be better at being dismissive of it than getting wrapped up in it. And this, I know, I've been harping a bit about this. For a little bit now about not getting offended. But to me, if that's the only way to handle it, if you actually care. If you actually care about the issues that you purport to want to see changed, or anything you see that you want reinforced as a belief system, if you really want those things, then you have to look at a strategy that will get them across. And this brings me to, again, the idea that the Russians didn't care about electing Donald Trump. They did not care about Trump's presidency. They are not supporters of Donald Trump. Do not believe for a second they support this man. What they want is the concept of American-style democracy to crumble under the weight of its own complexity. That they want oversimplification and hypervigilance to undermine the very tenets of our philosophy as a country, that you can differ civilly, and in the case of someone overreaching and stepping on your rights in a material sense, you have legal recourse, but everywhere else we just suck it up and live differently. And that a woman's right to choose is the law. Your opinion about whether or not it's a sin or whatnot is none of my business, and I don't care. As long as the law is there, that's what matters. And our protection of the law should become tantamount to what our platform as a party would be about. That's what's got to matter. But what happened, I think, during this election cycle was a lot of people believing that the opinion, the fight, the agreeance was more important than the result. And this, we saw this during the initial Obamacare fight. Better to go down swinging, trying for universal health care, than to put forward something that would help 20 million people. That might be the road to universal health care in its own way. And the undermining of a belief in that system, or the entrenched view, made it so that when the networks looked at the statistics about Obamacare, they saw statistics that said 58% of the United States, people in the United States, don't like Obamacare. You never saw them break it down into 39% of those people are Republicans who hate it because it's got Obama's name on it, and a small portion of them who believe that it's communism. And then the other people are Democrats who wish it went further, which is hardly an anti-Obamacare stance. It's actually, we just haven't reached the fullness of that result. But you will never see, because it doesn't serve the conversation on a 24-hour news cycle, the breakdown of statistics in that level. When Hillary Clinton's popularity is held up next to Donald Trump's popularity, and it looks like she's wholly unpopular, not because of who she is, but because of a big chunk of the people who don't like her are Republicans, and another chunk would rather have Bernie Sanders because he goes further down the road to progressive ideas, further down the road to liberal concepts than she does. That they believe in those ideas so fervently, they go beyond what she does. The belief system is, no, the vast majority of the United States doesn't want her and what she stands for. When the reality is, almost half of those people not only believe in those ideas, but wish they went deeper. That unpacking won't happen. Because eyeballs are eyeballs whether they like it or not in how news media and social media conflate. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT. Follow me at Hal Sparks on Twitter. Use the hashtag HSRPM to join the conversation. We'll be back. Do you live, Rocky Mountain Mike, do you live in Utah? I'm just kidding. Yeah, there was an inability on the part of progressives and liberals to have a disagreement with the president without enacting their vitriolic hate of George Bush in with this idea that the president became such a buzzword for hatred. If Clinton, who did win, was about to be in office, then Obamacare would get work done to make it better. That's totally true. And I agree, Lisanne. All these things are true, but none of us are going to convince those people to help the people that the Affordable Care Act was attempting to help. Because, again, they come from a purity standpoint, not a homogeny standpoint. Homogeny, when you're dealing with health care, is actually a good thing. We want everybody to have a baseline health standard. We may not everybody will have the access on a normal level. It'd be like public school and private school. Public school, at least you have that essence of an education. The Republicans are like, no, if you can't afford school, you can't go to school. It's up to your parents to figure out a way to make the money to send your kids to school. You don't deserve school if your parents can't afford it. Exclusion. Whereas, Democrats at their root, progressives, liberals.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Believe that you should at least have an option to have that. And then if you want to move up from there, if you want to go to school later, which is why Bernie's plan for free universities didn't stick with a lot of Democrats. It matters.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
So there are a lot of democratic ideals that are based on the idea of a baseline opportunity for everyone. And when we talk about the number of people who are on food stamps or the people who are receiving public assistance in this country, a lot of them being single parents or families, quite frankly, that have fostered children, the idea that, and I think this is a widely held democratic or liberal or progressive belief, that children are not at fault for what their parents are like. That it is not your fault as a child that your parents are lazy, broken, illiterate, drug addicted, are such white supremacists they would name you Adolf Hitler, as one guy attempted to do. It's not the kid's fault. Parents may oftentimes, and sometimes they don't, but oftentimes choose to have children. Children do not choose to have their parents. They don't pick their parents. And so they are not responsible for their, especially anything that happens under the age of emancipation, where you could sue your parents if you have the means and wherewithal, the ability, or the court directive, the protections to do so. That prenatal, you obviously don't have any chance of affecting your circumstance. And these are elements, by the way, that will affect you over the course of your entire life. Your cognitive ability, both your education and your nutrition at a very young age will affect you for the rest of your life. And Democrats and people who believe in genuine public education recognize that at least a baseline ability to read and write and understand on a, to have some level of critical thinking is a necessity for a successful country. Republicans, on the other hand, seem to have this idea that the only way to make America a land of winners is to guarantee losers based on heredity. That if you didn't have a head start, maybe you didn't deserve one, and this will teach your parents to be more entrepreneurial or something, and magically make a wealth base that they can pass on to their progeny. So in 3 generations, your family will have a shot. But if you weren't born into money, you are unfavorable to God. And this is essentially the same thinking that existed around royalty. And there are a lot of similarities between how the Republicans view leadership and how they view royalty. As a Democrat and as a liberal, as a progressive, all those labels fit, and I'm comfortable with all of them. I don't really feel the need to have a leader. I want a president who is functional and in the job capable, that is representative of of both the rules of the Constitution and the greater needs of the people for security, general welfare, public health, all the elements of the constitutional charter that is the role of government in a democracy, to vote on behalf of the best needs of the majority while protecting the rights of the minority against the tyranny of the majority, and also allowing the majority to absorb traits and wonders of the minorities while not being sideswiped ideologically by any particular changing tide unless it's been vetted over time. That would be the genuine conservative bent. Is the idea that, we may need to change things. Society may need to change to catch up to these things. But we'll put it through a vetting process, so this is a real change that will actually benefit both our, the majority and the people in the minority who want this thing, as opposed to a knee-jerk reaction. You can almost see the same psychology that played out in the rush to the Iraq War. that the public, in a response to a threat, will not always act in its best efforts. And so government is, in its charter, responsible for vetting all the information relative to the circumstance and pacing the introduction of the change circumstance defense response as best they can. And that is genuine conservative versus liberal philosophy, working out all the kinks of us working together as humanity. And so the question becomes for us as progressives and as Democrats go forward, there will be times often enough where strategically we have a responsibility to resist and to blockade certain knee-jerk changes the Republicans will want to make without a mandate, without a directive from the greater populace, where the perception that there are unheard voices in rural America that outweigh the voices in urban America, that those that live in cities and are, elbow to elbow with people of different philosophies, beliefs, religions, ethnicities, sexual identities, that those people are somehow not America, and that the unheard rural voice of America is really the true American spirit. A concept I disagree with vehemently, but try to do in a way that would allow those people in those rural communities to understand where we're coming from and bring them into the fold, and not, again, not to homogenize too much, to allow for that free speech discourse, as ugly and uncomfortable as it can be, but to avoid becoming effectively tools of the right wing or the Russians by fighting for an authoritarian purity test that's exclusive, that driving people out, that eliminating the ability for people to voice their beliefs to as many people as, and social media gives this, this artificial elevation to almost every voice, but that kind of becomes its balancing act. That by eliminating certain people from Twitter that say certain things that, that a large portion of people don't like, also eliminates the ability for those people who don't like it to answer that person, to criticize that person on said platform. And this is not, people who are making terroristic threats or any of that kind of stuff, but people who would be considered on, on the softer side of cyberbullying, or just ideologically trolls who believe something, but to get what they want through, they will use conflict at its root as opposed to an actual belief system on their own. Instead of fighting their own fight, they'll just go stir up a bunch of crap and leave it there, and while everybody's picking up the pieces, go pick everybody's pocket. We'll be back. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. We'll take your calls in a minute. 773-763-9278. Well, Charles, I think there are definitely hateful people among them. There's no question about that. But I do think you want to know what a common ground emotion is? Fear. I think a lot of the people who voted for Trump are not doing so out of hate. They're doing so out of fear. And you can call it xenophobia or homophobia or Islamophobia or what have you, but phobia means fear. Thank you, Julie. And the minute you say someone, by the way, is xenophobic, Islamophobic, homophobic, or whatever, you have to understand what you're saying is they have an illness they are not in control of. Xenophobia, homophobia, Islamophobia are not points of blame. they're not homophobia. That when you use those words, when you say somebody's homophobic, by the way, understand for a second that is not a slur. That is a description of someone with a mental illness. If you're using it legitimately, if you're saying someone's Islamophobic, you're saying they have a fear of Islam, not Muslims, not male Muslims of a certain age, not women in burqas, but a fear of the concepts in Islam. And you can never dissuade someone of their. It's great, Julie. I'm about halfway through. It's a big one, but it's great. Whenever you describe someone using the attachment phobia, you're not calling them out for some sort of evil. You're actually excusing them based on a mental illness. Yeah, Carl, that's a great point. Archie Bunker was afraid of change. And when he was confronted oftentimes in these stories, his heart would break for people who he oftentimes did not like. When he was really confronted with it, that was the underlying story of that, was that he was not, he was prejudiced without being bigoted or racist. He had preconceived notions he had grown up with, and he was growing out of them at an old age, which is he was an old dog being taught new tricks. That's all in the family. So, maybe they are, Gabrielle, but see, I don't believe in the phobia concept. I think it's an oversimplification. I think saying that people have a phobia about these things is excusing their behavior if you really believe it. Because someone with a phobia is to be pitied and guided. Right. Using it colloquially is undermines your own argument. Again, this is why I prefer the term prejudice, bigot, or racist. Again, if you're saying phobia is an irrational behavior, what you're saying is these people are irrational. Irrational is not something that you can yell at someone to get over. If someone's in an irrational state, it takes a lot of gentle guidance to get them back.
You have a little bit over a minute, and you have 3 callers.
Nice. Who do we have? We'll just take them in order, but just so I know.
Steve, Paul from Seattle, and Kevin from Chicago.
Great. Okay, cool. It's complex, but people more often than not mirror their parents' values, and if those values devalue blacks, Mexicans, then the bigotry will continue. I totally agree, but you're not going to talk them out of it by blaming them for it or whatever. What you can do is you can even say, even calling them a racist in those contexts where they grew up with it, calling them a racist is, means they have to defend themselves and their family using, because you've called them a racist, and therefore if it's something they learned from their parents, you're also attacking their parents. Where if you say that's a racist belief, that's a racist statement. And if they go, are you calling me a racist? I'm saying, I often am very comfortable saying, no, I don't think you're a racist. I don't think you're aware how racist what you're saying is, though. Because you have to look at how it carries forward.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
Well, I don't care for you if the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn pus-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
So we have a couple of calls on the line. Real quick, before we get into the calls, I just want to say that progressives, liberals, and Democrats need to, and conservatives need to do this as well. And this is something that every human being needs to involve themselves in, is that what path will actually get what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. Because even for conservatives, I think there's a generalized belief that if you wanted to if you tried to outlaw all abortions, for example, you would arguably cause more over time than if you made them, what Bill Clinton would say is safe, legal, and rare, and then work to morally and on a society level give a safety net to people who get pregnant who weren't intending to get pregnant or don't have the resources to raise a child in this modern society. You can at one point cut welfare and rail against single moms and also say that abortion should be illegal and not an option. Because effectively what you're saying is there should be unwanted children and I have no part to play in that morally. That my moral beliefs stop at the fetus, and so an army of unwanted children is not my responsibility. If you're pro-life and you don't believe there should be any abortions, open a line of orphanages. I don't know, but do something to support people in having those children. Be pro-life, not just pro-baby to term, which is really what they are. Forced pregnancy, if you want to call it that. Because once your belief that your insistence that life is simply physically alive with a heartbeat at the end of 9 months, and that life is not all the opportunities and elements as an American, that being born an American has certain rights and privileges that come with it because of because of our Constitution, which you so fervently believe in, that you have a responsibility in these circumstances to say I'm pro-life, and therefore we need a society where every person who wants to have a child should have no fear about having that child. That we are such a prosperous nation and we also create such a robust safety net that it is not necessary. And I will do everything like that. That's what's required. But they won't do that. Basically, they'll just say, we want to outlaw it. That will stop it. When they know full well that they won't stop at that. And even Trump said, well, you probably just have to go across the border or have back alley abortions. That's probably what will happen. But that's just part of the cost of doing business. That's not pro-life. That's saying the mom should die with the baby. That's what that is. And there's nothing pro-life about that. It's an absurdity. But the vast majority of Republicans aren't really pro-life in that sense. Not like that. A large portion of them, don't believe in abortion, wouldn't have one, still believe in a woman's right to choose. Have a hard time having that argument with their conservative friends, but that's part of it. What's genuinely good about being a conservative is this idea that legal actions, that laws themselves have a continuing ramification that goes on, that there is the law spreads over time to incorporate there are consequences of a law that you may not be aware of that have to be dealt with at the time of writing and creating the law. All laws are like that. That's why they have to be amended and fixed. The Constitution itself needed to be amended. Because those unforeseen circumstances that happen because of that are the responsibility of government, the responsibility of the rule of law. That's why there's so much legalese, because you have to look at all the permutations. It's like every time WikiLeaks comes out and the U.S. had a plan to bomb Guam or, blow up, release anthrax into, to kill dolphins in Antarctica or something. They didn't. But the point being, every time they come up with they release something, the Defense Department was coming up with a plan for blah, blah, blah. Literally, there are people at the Defense Department, their whole job is to come up with a plan for everything. That's their job. It literally just said, like, okay, every possible outcome. Come up with a plan. What's our response if we're attacked by the U.S. Virgin Islands? What do we do? What do we do if Castro dies, but the Chinese take over Cuba, and then the Chinese become a capitalist democracy, and Taiwan takes over China as the economic interest, and ultimately the only communist nation is Cuba, and they seize Guantanamo as a base, hire all the expel all our soldiers, have all the terrorists put in parliamentary positions. Like, there's some dude who's drafted up that possibility. It's absurd, but that's their job. The ramifications of each circumstance. Looking out as far as you possibly can and trying to do some level of three-level chess and going, if this might happen, and this might happen because of it. If this happens, this might happen, and that might happen. That's what the Department of Defense does. That's what the law should be. That's why Democrats, unlike Republicans, don't fear complication in law, because we recognize this is a country of 330 million people, and when you have a healthcare law that will affect all of them, it damn well should be 3,000 pages. That the tax law involves, in a country with as many opportunities to make money and get rich and have dividend income and Social Security at the same time, and open your own business while working for a corporation or have shell corporations, all those things that Republicans love about our entrepreneurial and corporate structure, should have a complex tax code. But their fear of complexity points to the fact that they just don't believe that the world is as complex as it is, because either it can't fit in their brain, or they want to exclude people. There's two groups of conservatives kind of running things right now. The group that doesn't want outsiders of any other sort, minorities, people with different sexual identities than they're comfortable with, women, all these groups, they don't want them in. It's an old boys club. They're in it and they're stuck in it. It's a dwindling group of people, but they're there. And then another group that believes that there's some sort of magical purity test that they themselves passed by their parents being, already rich or already together, and therefore they get an exclusive pass to the club, and everybody else has to climb up the outside. The Paul Ryans of the world. That, he got a Social Security safety net when his father passed away that allowed him to go to college and made him eventually be able to run the House of Representatives. But anybody else who wants that same benefit is out of luck, because he's in the safety boat and he's pulling the ladder up after him. That's essentially the top tier of that. And as Democrats and as liberals, we have a responsibility. Wow, I already went into this break. We're going to take a break in a minute, and then we'll get to your calls, 773-763-9278. As Democrats, we have a responsibility to not behave in the same way. To not go, I'm a progressive purist. I believe in universal health care, so any other plan short of that is heresy and is an affront to human values and is evil. And anybody who would push that is intentionally, shilling or selling human life down the river. I see very little, the faces of people arguing over the initial inclusion of universal health care and the Affordable Care Act and the ability to get it through, and the people who pushed that idea that Planned Parenthood was selling baby parts, they have the same look on their face. And they're both equally full of crap. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Think I picked enough of a fight there? I think so. Sean, there's an interesting thing about. Sorry, you were going to say something, Lady B?
No, I was just wondering, did you hear your promo right after you?
Was it Land of Confusion?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, which is, by the way, a song that Genesis wrote about Reagan and the fact that he was he was basically in primary dementia at the end of his presidency, and he had the ability to put his thumb on the button. In the video, he pushes the launch button and thought it said lunch. Like, that was the joke they made, was that he was so out of it. That he might have ordered a nuclear strike. Yeah. So, and I think you played two versions of it. That's the original Genesis version. Then you played the
Disturbed
copy.
Disturbed.
Disturbed. Yeah, I sang with those guys at Steel Panther a couple of times. Like, the lead singer came up and he and I sang AC/DC together, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's a good dude. He's got one of those lower like those chin lip piercings. That's like, I don't even know where your chin scruff in the center goes or whatever. It just feels like it would knock against your the nerve of your lower teeth, like below your
voice box. Oh, okay, right there.
Above your chin, below your lip, like that middle part right there. It just like. It's like where your, if your dentist like is cleaning your mouth or whatever, and he shoots water just below that, and it's amazingly, stupidly sensitive, that kind of thing. He's got it right there. Yeah, the metal soul patch is what Ellie called it in our chat room. Yeah.
Okay.
Billy,
10 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Reagan entered primary dementia, in theory anyways, after he was shot. He lost so much blood that it sped up his Alzheimer's.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
I'm sure our callers have a lot to say. I've obviously covered a lot today, so let's get in with them, starting with good old Steve from the Gold Coast is with us, I think, if he's there. Steve, are you there? Do we have him? Hello?
Hello?
There he is.
Hello?
Hey, Steve, go ahead.
Hello, I'm here.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Great. Yes, you raised some really great points, and I wanted to add some context. When I was in graduate school back in the early 90s, that's when I first started to take an interest in just how media can affect the outcome of our races, of our politics, of our government, and influence public policy. I mean, for people who don't know it, don't remember, perhaps aren't old enough, 1994 ushered in the Newt Gingrich revolution, and that was in no small part due to the impact of talk radio and people like Rush Limbaugh and so forth. And now we fast forward and we find a new technology, which basically is very democratic. Certainly, the internet you can find almost anything you want there. The problem is that there are no gatekeepers.
Right.
At the New York Times, at ABC News, whatever mainstream media you want to talk about, you as a journalist, I don't care who you are, you can't just submit a story. It goes through an editor, goes through fact check after fact check, and if you know anybody who's actually a journalist, you know that time after time their boss is going to say, nope, sorry, you don't got it.
Right.
You need another source, you need more proof, you need this, you need that, and then come back to me. Now, the internet has no such requirement. So what you have is, one, the right has created this idea that, one, you can't trust the mainstream media. Two, you also can't trust anything that comes out of universities because those people are all liberal. So, of course, any study, any science, anything you want to point to, they'll simply chalk it up to, no, that's just biased liberal crap.
Right.
And, we just don't believe it. So, despite the fact that the science is irrefutable, such as on global warming. And the fact that we don't have gatekeepers when it comes to the internet allows, again, for any and all crazy, idiotic, and moronic. Hello?
Yeah, you're good.
Yes, allow for anything crazy, idiotic, and moronic. And the fact is, when people who do not understand, this concept of epistemology, how you come to know something, such that, and Donald Trump is a great example of one of these people. What's true is the last thing that somebody tweeted me, or the last thing that I found on some obscure site.
Or the last thing somebody showed me before I walked on stage at a speech. Right.
Right, exactly. And not for a moment thinking, what is the source material? Is there anything to support this? I mean, because, there's something I can look up, and I can look it up for the American Psychological Association versus Joe Blow's blog. And to some people out there, there is no difference between those two. But there is a difference to anybody who understands the difference. And unfortunately, this is where we are, because you cannot get many people in this country to change their minds because of exactly this. And it's the same mentality that underpins mob, shall we say, rule or riots. Study after study will show you that an individual or two is not likely to try and come out of a sporting event or something else and say, hey, let's try and tip over that car. But if enough people gather together and you get this mob mentality, they will do something like that.
Right.
And this is the same thing that we have vis-a-vis the internet, because now the alt-right has enough sources and sites that you can go on to YouTube. I mean, you find all sorts of nonsense, ridiculous claims that you care to find if you're part of this mindset. And now you have a community of people that identify with you that did not exist for you 20 years ago because you were isolated. You were a lone nut, as it were.
Yeah.
But now you've come to believe that there are tens of millions, if not a majority of Americans, that actually believe what you believe. And honestly, you raised an important point when we talked about the structure of the party system, because we don't have a parliamentarian system in this country such as we have in Western Europe. And as a result of which, it's a sort of winner take all. And here you have elements of the Republican Party, and as you pointed out, and also the Democratic Party, whereas those elements would be very distinct and different elements in, say, Europe, where you'd have a Labour Party, you'd have a Green Party, and then depending upon how an election turns out, you then build a coalition government with those constituent elements and come together and say, okay, you give us this, we'll give you that, and together we have enough votes to form a government.
Right.
And in America, unfortunately, we don't have something. I would argue that their system is better than ours. The sort of winner-take-all that sort of excludes a lot of people. On the other hand, it also means that, as you pointed out, rightfully so, that you get outcomes that are not reflective of this sort of a binary way of thinking. Just because somebody is a Democrat does not mean that they were for universal health care. And you had to twist the arms of people in your own party in order to get them to vote for the Affordable Care Act, let alone universal health care. So, it's simply, people who want to talk about, well, Barack Obama had, a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House of Representatives, as if every Democrat thinks alike, as if a Democrat from, West Texas thinks the way a Democrat from Massachusetts thinks. It's absurd. They're moderate. They're considered a Republican in Massachusetts, as opposed to a Democrat. So, again, nuance, is just not, they're not big on nuance. I think it was Mario Cuomo who said that, liberals like to write in using quill pens, and conservatives like to write in crayon. Basically, the more simple it is, the more receptive they are to it. Complexity and nuance are not their strong suit. And, anytime anything is too complex, no, we can't have that, because it strains our brains. We need to drive through a public policy. Give it to me on something I can read in a paragraph, which, of course, you cannot do when it comes to a complex society with 320-plus million people in it.
That's right.
So God forbid that we have complexity. It's amazing to me that people would never go see a doctor who had that same sort of training. I didn't go through 6 years of medical school or whatnot. No, I did it in a year through an online course through University of Phoenix.
Right.
I mean, would you go see that doctor? No, none of them would. But they somehow think public policy should be made in that way.
Well, there was that guy got interviewed where he was like, I run a chicken place, and I'd never let somebody from the government come in here and run my business, because these people don't know how to run a business. I'm like, well, you've never drafted a law that incorporates anybody but your employees. You've never established a policy outside what goes on through your drive-through window. And by the way, since you're a franchise, you didn't even draft up or develop the franchise agreement. You just signed it. Like, there's so many areas where the arrogance of that particular thing and this kind of anti-elite, it's funny. It's an elitist form of anti-elitism. I've reached my pinnacle and I'm special. I've done, something extraordinary here and I'm so good at it. I'm so, this is so specifically great, what I'm doing, that somehow these, nobody could teach me, nobody could tell me how to make my own, my own business anymore. Like literally, like I have nothing to learn from anyone because nobody could come in here and do this better than I can, which is an absurdity at its base. It just is. It's goofy, that concept. But there's this belief that, well, what makes, what makes him, this guy special, is his business acumen, his ability to do all this or whatever. Well, he writes off so many of the things, the elements that are special, quite frankly, to his, all the things he takes for granted. It is the same ruling that goes, if I don't want to serve black people or if I don't want to serve gay people, I shouldn't have to as a business because I created this business and it should be my, I have, I run this business all the time. I made it great. Nobody deserves to make me serve people that I don't want to serve. Well, guess what? You benefit from the tax dollars of everyone else, and those tax dollars are compulsory. So gay people and black people and Jews and all these people you would love to exclude don't have a choice to not make sure there's a stop sign at the intersection near your business, or that the stop lights that lead to your business go off and on at the right rate. They don't have a choice. They pay those taxes and you benefit from those things, but then you get to exclude them at their will. They don't get to exclude you from the stoplight. We are a country of laws and equal protection. If you want to be a religious exclude based on religious beliefs or ethnicity or sexual preference or all those things, there are dozens of countries that you could be very happy in. This is not one of them. A liberal democracy, which is what we are, a republic that operates as a democracy, cannot operate on an unequal expression of the law. And it is not religious or personal freedom to exclude people from business when, if you had to sue someone, you would get to take advantage of the benefits of our legal system. You would get to benefit from the courts that are all paid for with tax dollars, by the way. You would certainly pay some fees, as many people do. But the overreaching element of it, which you could never afford on your own, I don't care how big your business is, the benefits of those are provided for you by all the other taxpayers, by the citizens of this country, which you are lucky enough to participate in. So if you don't like a certain group of people and you don't want to serve them and they're not acting up and ruining business for your other customers through behavior, you just don't like it because of what they believe, for God's sake, which has nothing to do with the price of pizza, or whether or not you define them as sinners or not. Tough. Open a snack shop inside a church that only serves people who are there and is only, and the people who work there are only true believers. Be a cult. Start your own pineapple farm someplace. But as long as you're a participant in our democracy, the standards are higher for your behavior. Sorry. You don't get to opt out here and there when you feel like you don't want to be a citizen anymore. It's why I'm 100% behind free speech and free expression, even if I dislike it. That's why I would not deny someone the ability to come see a show or do something that I did because I don't like their beliefs. As a matter of fact, I would hope they would show up and possibly I could help change their mind. Not serving somebody, is not being a part of a democracy. Proselytize all you want. You have the right to do that. Be Chick-fil-A and you want to put, some sort of random Bible verse on stuff to try and teach your lesson, knock yourself out. But stopping people at the door, that's not what we do in a democracy. I think we would all be better off if we checked ourselves based on our real beliefs or our purported beliefs, and look at how we're behaving and how does that line up with what we're actually doing. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. But yeah, Sean, that whole thing about Sharia law is a great example of that. I don't want people instituting Sharia law, but they want to operate in terms of gay people and women. They want laws enacted that are effectively the same goddamn thing. No pun intended. See. I'm stretching, not flexing. Although, the 200 push-ups a day, it's good stuff. Thank you. I'm catching up on my reading of the yeah, Christian Sharia is okay, Islamic not so much. Yeah. The other side's argument about gays, I don't want them to have more rights than we have. Yeah, nobody does. It's like that old argument about the gay agenda. It's like, if you're holding someone underwater and they're punching you, trying to not drown, they don't have an agenda, you do. There's no, trying to get the right to marry or just be yourself in public in a democracy is not an agenda. Oh, thanks, Ginger.
1 minute and 4 callers.
Cool. Thank you very much. And again, Charles, the American Taliban concept is it's one of the areas where it makes a provocative point, but what they respond to it is, we're nothing like that's these people are dragging people out in the street and cutting their heads and hands off. I'm just calling you names.
Now back to the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back. We have a bunch of callers, so let's get Adam. Who do we have first, Lady B?
We have Paul from Seattle.
Oh, hey, Paul. Welcome.
Hi, Hal.
Yeah.
Hey, how's you doing?
Good. Go ahead.
Listen, let me tag up on the. I'll try to run the bases real quick, but let me tag up on the last base, which was. I love your analogy about the franchises, but I would add this is that the notion that government should just get out of the way in terms of business. And I would cite the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, the Interstate Commerce Clause, where Congress has the power to regulate interstate commerce, specifically means that government should get in the way, because when they wrote that, there was already, presumably, interstate commerce was already taking place. They didn't just write and say, and if any interstate commerce crops up, we get to regulate it. There was already interstate commerce taking place, and the problem was that everyone was setting their own rules, and it was unworkable.
Right.
That's part of what led to saying we can't just be a confederacy, we have to be a united states. But as for kind of the beginning, I think there are the factions on both sides, the left and the right, that are, I guess, sort of extremists. I would say on the right is the Tea Party, and on the left it would be, I guess, what we call the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Both have these purity tests that they're very different, but they're equally unworkable. On the Democratic side, I would say the idea, I think you mentioned it, that we have to have a single payer, and they're both rooted in kind of ignorance of how unworkable they are. Is that, it's kind of like the old, you stop and ask the farmer for directions, and he says, well, you can't get there from here. You have to go somewhere else first.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is with single payer.
That's right.
You can't just have single payer. It would be we have to go somewhere else first. We have to restructure our system. You can't just, if you had single payer in the system we have now, it would crash too.
Yep.
Because it's.
That's right, and that's why all the studies pointed that way, and the Obama administration and a lot of other people, including, by the way, people who are advocating for it, they were like, okay, if it's got to be a bank shot, how do we do it? What's the best version of that bank shot the quickest? And what they ended up, with was, left to its own devices, would actually be very successful in that. But the unpopularity on the Democratic side of the idea of doing anything but it by a certain group of people artificially raised the unpopular, lowered the popularity rating of the Affordable Care Act to make it easily, destroyed. That now there's this weird kind of closet public mandate against it, because the people who want it to go further can't just admit this is a good step in the right direction and it needs to go further. They have to hate it. It's weird. But go ahead.
Kind of the other base I was going to touch here was you said we have the two most unpopular candidates, and I don't believe that. I think we had one most unpopular candidate, and the function of the meddling, of the hacking, of the propaganda, we call it fake news. The Russians know that much better as propaganda.
Yeah, right.
And the propagandists, and they know the effects and how to deal with propaganda. They're experts at it. They know that all you had to do, you had one very unpopular candidate. All you had to do was make two. It's a lot harder to make a popular candidate. So if you make two unpopular candidates, you create. It's kind of what you referred to. You were alluded to a few minutes ago. Is that if you just make a giant mess, who knows who could turn out on top? And Trump took it. It was tailor-made for Trump, because all he was doing was, he wasn't going to be a politician. He was going to take a reality TV approach to the whole thing. And if he lost, he lost. He doesn't care. He benefits either way.
Right.
But I think he didn't expect to win. But along with and I think you're right, the Russians don't care, that they don't support Donald Trump. All they wanted to do was mess up and meddle with and destabilize and make less credible the American process, as they do with all Democrats when they meddle in other countries' elections. And it is very similar in a way. This is the updated version of terrorism. What the terrorists learn is, you can make them afraid, but the problem with that, knocking down buildings with airplanes, is all the Americans will all unite together. That'll all make them stronger.
Yep.
If you do it this way, make their intelligence uncredible, make everything a mess so that nobody trusts anybody, that's a much more effective, comrade.
Oh, paranoia is a much better weapon than any bomb, because it makes everyone an enemy.
Right. And it's kind of like, and you probably know this one, the old Rod Serling, Monsters on Maple Street. You know that one?
No, I don't.
It's Oh, you gotta look at it. Watch it on YouTube. Monsters on Maple Street was where the people on Maple Street, a meteorite came over and crashed, and then all of a sudden a lot of weird things were going on, and everybody on Maple Street started looking at it. Somebody said, it could be Martians or it could be aliens. And the next thing you know, everybody on Maple Street is looking at each other going, you're kind of strange. I've known you a long time, but there's one thing. Hey, Al, how come your car starts but none of ours do?
Right.
It started to be this giant paranoia thing, and the next thing you know, everybody in Maple, they start shooting each other. And what's really funny is at the very end, the camera pans into this spaceship, and the aliens say, now it's time for us to move in.
Yeah.
They've already destroyed each other with their paranoia, right?
That's right. That's right.
Oh, you gotta watch Monsters on Maple Street on YouTube.
I insist that's isn't that been turned into a series called The Americans? I don't know, but it was on Twilight Zone, and it was also topped up in our 7th grade literature book. We had to read that and talk about it. So it's a classic old Twilight Zone one, and that's really what's kind of gone on here. Right.
Is that and nobody's trustworthy. I love the one and what I would recite to. This is hilarious. Let's make, and even people on the left, let's make her hate Hillary Clinton too.
Right.
Which seemed to be an easy thing to do. The funniest thing, Hal, I got to tell you this, was Alex Jones saying, and Hillary Clinton was involved in throwing Catholic priests off cliffs in Syria.
Right.
And I laughed and fell on the floor. I didn't know where that comes from. I thought, he's been reading Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls. It came right out of that book.
That's right.
That was what happened in the Spanish Civil War. The rebels who, when the Catholic Church was supporting Francisco Franco, and the Freedom Rebels had a church. They captured a church, and they had this rickets line where they'd make everybody who was in there walk through the rickets. They beat them with sticks, and then at the end of the line, they threw you off a cliff.
Right.
That was in the book, and then this is what's brought up by Alex Jones, and people go, "Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's how evil she is." That's the thing that just cracked me up about this whole thing, is that the propaganda was so effective. It's so unbelievable, but then you look at it, Hal, and you see, America is primed and ready for it because America is all about reality TV. So of course propaganda works.
Effectively, those are propaganda. They are officially, the illusion of a contest, because that's what it's the assumption about reality. I don't know if most people know this, but most of the reality shows that people watch that are quote-unquote not competition shows, which are just game shows, by the way. Any competition show there's no difference between it and Jeopardy or Battle of the Network Stars. But all the other ones, like the Kardashians and all those shows, Family Jewels, Hogan Knows Best, whatever those shows are, those are called in the industry not reality shows, but docu-soaps. They are written and crafted storylines to intentionally manipulate the audience to believe they are documentaries, but they are artificial. The relationship problems and all those things are created specifically to keep you coming back because people are unfortunately boring. And too boring for television, even your favorite celebrity. Appreciate the call. We got to take a break, and when we come back, we'll do a couple more calls, and then the happy ending. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. The shirt I'm wearing is I got it off of Etsy. It's a Galaxy Quest shirt. Never give up, never surrender. Camden loves Galaxy Quest. I don't know what to tell you. I've introduced him to a couple of funny things, and that are in that zone, and for whatever reason, He just loves Galaxy Quest. You are our last hope. I like that whole thing.
This morning,
1 minute, and we have 3 callers still.
Cool. Now, I would not troll you. I would not rickroll you, Billy. Never gonna give you up. No, right. Let you down. Never gonna tell a lie. Hurt you.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. It's now time for the happy ending.
Welcome back. Let's take another caller, Lady B. Who do we have? Whoops.
We have Kevin from Chicago.
Cool. Hey, Kevin. Go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, Hal.
Thanks.
I'll make a really quick point here. I'm glad Paul called because I agree with a lot of what he had to say. I do have a couple of issues. I think we have created part of this conundrum that we have. We like to blame Fox News a lot, but I've been listening to a lot of progressive talk radio, and there's been a lot of Clinton bashing, and she had been our candidate, and we were not getting behind her.
I agree.
And we created the situation. We made her an unpopular candidate. We ate up all that propaganda that was being said about her. So we created it. And I honestly think there's a very good possibility we could have not 4 years of Trump, but 8 if we don't get our acts together and figure out that we're all on the same team.
Right. I agree. I think there's an element of I found it ironic that as progressives, as liberals, we are we have a self-belief and perhaps a self-reinforcing belief sometimes that we are the party of inclusion, that we believe that people of all walks of life should be respected for who they are. They should be allowed to, genuinely, be themselves, and without, some awful bigot stopping them from making a prejudiced assumption about them. And then at the same time, act in that same way about people who we know for a fact ally with us on a political ideology. That we believe certain things, intrinsic beliefs. We may differ on tactics, how to make it come about. But we will fight each other on some sort of verbal purity test or whatever. That happens all the time on social media. And again, my personal response to it most of the time is to not take it seriously. That when I see people who are, purport to be progressive or liberal, making some sort of vitriolic, accusatory, attack on myself or somebody else, I very rarely get it, but I've seen other people certainly, fall to it. The most recent one is, Steve Martin's, obituary moment for Carrie Fisher, where he was attacked. No one in their right mind thinks for a second that Steve Martin is some sort of vicious, misogynistic person with a desire for women not to make it in the industry or some nonsense like that. I mean, that's craziness to believe that for a second. So to attack him sort of as such is more damaging to the cause because it drives allies away. It makes it an unsafe space, to use a current term, for anybody to just be themselves. The danger of being misunderstood is as equal as being violently negative, which it cannot be. We will never survive as and get anything done if misspeak or someone actually saying what they feel but not from a hateful space is taken as hateful speech as a knee-jerk, that will undermine the argument for your cause, because people will go, well, if you guys get in charge, you'll just be authoritarian maniacs. You'll tear people apart. I mean, this is how you treat your friends. How are you going to be when, somebody genuinely disagrees with you? You're probably going to kill them, is the feeling. So the idea that anybody would support people in a political sense shrinks immeasurably on that. So I hear you. I mean, I think we have a responsibility, if we're going to be the party of liberals, of progressive thought. We have to be able to take the rough parts of our democracy better than others. We got to be better at it. There is no other way. And you cannot answer prejudice with prejudice. It's foolish. Fighting fire with fire is a good way to burn your house down. And by the way, when I see people doing that online, I immediately assume that they are a fake Russian account intentionally creating fights, even if it has a blue check mark and says Lena Dunham or something on it. Like, I just assume that you've been hacked by someone who wants to destroy democracy. That's my way of giving you the benefit of the doubt. Let's take another caller. Appreciate it. Who do we have, Lady B?
We have Chris from Elmhurst.
Cool. Hey, Chris. Welcome.
Hey, Hal. Thanks very much for taking my call.
Absolutely.
Just real quick here. Just going back to 2008 and all through this time, you've noticed how the Republicans and the right have always vilified Barack Obama as a community organizer, and he's tied to that commie, Jew Saul Alinsky and all of his, community organizing campaigns, and just how that ties together with what you're saying here. The Tea Party and the Koch brothers have totally flipped the script, and they use all of that stuff to put their ideas, their agenda, and their people in power. And we're the ones who have to realize, that's what we got to do. So I'll bail and I'll let you go, but thanks very much.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. So Barack Obama gets derided as a community organizer, gets literally lambasted with this, this label that they've put on him. And what is the liberal response across the base? To stop community organizing. Effectively to stop outreach. To huddle. And, we're not the only ones who do it. Republicans do it all the time, too. They're cut into two camps as well. There's the Never Trumps who have now had to acquiesce and are now kowtowing to this maniac. And interestingly enough, this is a situation they find themselves in that no Democrat has really found themselves in. There is not a Tea Party-esque constituency that lived in fear of the Obama White House. And right now I hear people going, well, maybe they should have. Maybe should have twisted some arms like Lyndon Johnson, whatever. Yeah, again, let us not forget that Lyndon Johnson once took his junk out and showed it to a reporter when asked a question about Vietnam. So if that's your idea of good governance and representative of the people, perhaps you have an issue in that. But the idea is that people have a responsibility, to question the leaders of their party, the representatives, absolutely. But if you get into a position where you're just operating that they are your adversary, then at some point you will behave in an adversarial position to them, undermining entirely your community. There's an unfortunate part of community organizing is that at some point you're going to be talking to a gang member or a mobster or a real estate developer that does not mean well for the whole community, but they're part of it. They live there. They own property. They are, and you can't sidestep them entirely because of that. And there's some odd belief that people think we can. Let me get one more caller before we run out of time. Who do we have, Lady B? Pretty sure we have one left.
We have Robert.
Yeah, cool. Hey, Robert, welcome.
Thank you. I'm the one left.
Excellent.
Thank you. I'm the one left.
Perfect.
How are you? Well, yeah, listen, that Paul guy's got a case of the smarts from Washington. I love listening to his ideas and thoughts. And I agree with you too. With when you talk about Russia hacking left or right, it really doesn't matter as long as they create havoc.
That's right.
And it's like the casino. You can't have everybody betting one way. You got to put it in the middle. And so maybe in essence, World War III started and we already lost. Without even firing a weapon.
Well, I don't think. I think it's ongoing. I don't think lost.
War.
I see where you're going. I don't think we lost, but I think it's ongoing. I think it is. It is in the information age. This is a hot war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, real fast, real quick. You know how the Republicans are going to talk about health care and everything, and replace and repeal, and they always go to the old adage across state lines. Well, if that's the case, I live here in South Florida. How about giving me money and or let me go buy my health care from Cuba, which is going to be opened up. They have great doctors.
Oh yeah.
I saw the Michael Moore film.
Right.
You know what? I could be there and back. In 2 hours. So.
Oh, watch! By the way, watch for that to happen.
Prescription drugs for everybody who needs it.
You're absolutely right. By the way, watch for more of that to actually happen in Florida. Yep.
I'll give you proof.
Mm-hmm.
When we lived in Western New York, we used to go to Niagara Falls for like health care. It was cheaper out of pocket than to pay your insurance.
That's right.
No, we did pay insurance, but still, even with the insurance premiums and the what you want to call it, you got to come up with the premium.
The copay.
It was still cheaper to just pay cash in Canada.
That's right.
Yay. All right, ciao, Gumba. Be good.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much. As we come near the bottom of the hour and the show as it continues, again, we try on this show to have a regular element of good news about all this stuff, and I do think that there is a piece of good news that's coming from this. And by the way, on a mechanical sense, the Tesla Gigafactory just opened up in Reno, Nevada. I feel like sometimes all of our tech good news comes out of the Elon Musk world. But I mean, it's great to see them doing this. The Tesla Gigafactory is in Reno, Nevada, and it's going to actually. They turned it on this week. It's literally going to make batteries, and those batteries themselves are going to make basically autonomous housing possible in the United States, off the grid, all that kind of stuff. This is something that the craziest Republicans, who want to have their own, private, I don't want to participate in society. Good, go have a mountaintop house with solar panels and a battery system and your own water filtration. I don't need to hear from you. That's fine. The Gigafactory is where they're going to make batteries, both them and I want to say, Google is involved with it. Either way, it's a huge step forward, and I think as soon as we abandon fossil fuels for good, and whether Republicans like it or not, or these, whether the dude from Exxon who's going to be the Secretary of State likes it or not, that's ending. Fossil fuels are ending. And when that ends, resource-based economies shift forever, and this becomes a world of ideas. Make sure you're good at showing yours. You guys are awesome. Thank you for joining us. Be tough out there. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I think I'm glad. Was it audio clear most of the show, other than the couple of dropouts at the beginning?
Right. It was majority.
Great. Love it. Okay. Thank you so much. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Hey, chat room. How you doing? I'm going to take my headphones out because I don't have to hear Chicago. Oh, man. 2 hours of headphones in. It's crazy. Yeah, the show kind of races by. Absolutely. Thanks, What a Porn. Thanks, Julie. Hey, Nancy. Hey, oh, cool. Susie, that's great. Coming to the show tonight in Burbank, downtown Burbank. Last night was a really fun show. It was great, actually. And thanks, guys, for everybody in the chat for being part of this. There's the reason I'm addressing how progressives and liberals talk to each other is, and why I'm going to continue to do this over the, especially over the next year. Never give up, never surrender, is because I think it's one of the things that creates a downturn in turnout in the midterms. And I feel a genuine responsibility to drive up voter turnout, keep it high. Obviously, I think I think there's a very strong chance this could be the most certainly it will be one of the most highly anticipated midterm elections in recent history. This might be, many people, myself included, think that one of the if you ask the question, what did it take to get a black president elected? Part of it was the country being ready for it, because I think we already have been for a very long time. What I think part of it was George W. Bush, was how horrible his presidency was, and this idea that okay, enough, and it was such a switch in that regard that it was a necessity for that. So to me, I think that's super important. The other thing being is that I think the same thing may be true about midterm elections in terms of Democrats and progressives, that what will finally make us start taking that seriously is Trump, effectively. That in our refusal to understand the importance of midterm elections, what it will take us to scare us out into it and get everybody up off their butts about this, instead of every 4 years, that the 2 years matter. And it may even invert. It may be the fact that they may be right, that Trump may get 8 years out of this if people feel, if the Democrats can't run somebody that's got some fervor next time, if they try to put a Dukakis type up against him somehow and he wins the attitude war again. But it could be where Democrats seize the Senate and the House again, through that, through the fact that we start taking down ticket races, governorships, all those kind of things a lot more seriously. Alan Rickman has passed away. It is true. He's been dead for a little while. So there you go. Turn this little camera off because it's dead. Yeah, I think it's time for a lawsuit. I think there needs to be a from a voter standpoint, effectively a class action lawsuit against the either state governments or the federal government. I think the federal government should be part of it. Mm-hmm. Let's see. We have you. I agree about the Senate being difficult in 2018, Carl, but I also think that the chances, the tide shifts in the other direction, and a level of protected safety that the Republicans will feel. Because a lot of the people who voted, a lot of the reason why, Republicans, why Trump got in, there was, but not a lot of necessarily, a lot of them in straight ticket areas where a lot of Republicans benefited from that. Those same people aren't going to go out during the midterms. They're the people. They're the weak-kneed liberal Obama voters of the conservative party. And many people, those folks who voted, came out just to vote for Trump, will go right back into their cave and especially if he makes, he's going to make the U.S. pay for the wall. He's going to, this is going to be paid for with taxpayer dollars using an old George H.W. Bush law. And he's obviously, they're going to have a real mess on their hands if they repeal the Affordable Care Act. In terms of, not having a replacement first. And I think a lawsuit about being disenfranchised as a voter and not having your vote count, it's just way overdue. That the American people deserve. You should be automatically registered. You shouldn't have to register to vote. You should have it follow you. You should use your social security number as your point of voting. If you can't opt out of having a social security number, you get to in your register to vote. You use your social security number to vote. Use the last 4 digits, just like a bank, just like anything else. Somebody can't get your whole one. You can't steal them, but that's how you go in and do it. Yeah, but it's again, where's the payoff? I think that's just how you register. It may not be how you actually do it, but you give your name and your address when you go in to vote too. So it's not anonymity that you voted. It's obviously public record which party you're registered to. So how you go in and vote is still anonymous no matter what. It's the fact that you voted. And the attachment to that you get to monitor your vote. This is yes, Supreme Court justices can be impeached. So, but right now, in terms of voting in the Constitution, there is no real federal right to vote. So Amendment 15 says, ratified in 1870, says Section 1, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state or on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So it does technically establish the right of a citizen to vote in the primary sentence. It says it shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Meaning, if you used to be a slave, you could still vote. Is essentially what it was. That right is not actually guaranteed earlier. So let's see. So the ability to vote can be abridged and affronted all over the place. The right to vote must be there, but if that right is effectively too hard to carry out, if it requires too much effort compared to someone else, then effectively it's an equal protection issue, one would think. Okay, so neither the American people nor the federal courts would tolerate restrictions of this sort if they were imposed on free speech, free assembly, freedom of religion, or freedom of petition to government or redress of grievances. For that matter, many southern states, probably a majority of the Supreme Court, would reject far less onerous restrictions on the right to keep and bear arms, yet each of these rights is mentioned only once in the Constitution. The right to vote is mentioned 5 times, and yet the court has brushed it aside as a privilege that states may observe at their convenience. Even an overwhelming majority of Congress, which is given the power to enforce the right in no fewer than 4 different places in the Constitution, cannot protect this right more strongly than the courts feel appropriate. What would happen if the Constitution's text was taken seriously? Consider this instruction to a house sitter. Don't let the dog out at night. Don't feed the dog dry food. The homeowner returns 6 weeks later to find the dog dead of starvation. The house sitter explains, you never said there actually was a dog, or if there was one I should feed it. just that I shouldn't let it out or feed it dry food. I did neither. Would that explanation satisfy the owner? And that's the example as far. So, yeah, undue burden. It's many things. Yeah, it's the same thing with abortion and health clinics. That voting in the country cannot fall under an undue burden, and it does. It clearly does in a bunch of countries, counties, and in different states. So, I think sometime this summer, that should be. I don't know if I'll be able to drum people up to do it myself. If I'll have to, file that lawsuit under the idea, because you have to prove that you were harmed, and if you can say, well, after Trump institutes some of his policies, and I go, actually, his policies would not be in place if everybody who had the right to vote was able to vote. Here's, these many, many cases of people who were denied were put under undue burden to vote, and that affects me as a voter because those people agree with me, and there's a lot more of them. That seems to be the logical argument, that anybody in this country could technically make the case that by everybody not being able to vote, that there is a guaranteed imbalance in the political spectrum, and that limited arguments are made. Certain districts will have, and areas like Ohio and Florida will have more import due to this imbalance than other states, and the inability to catch up or deal with them. That you have a situation where the popular vote went to the person who lost the election for the second time in 15 years, means that there are a lot of people who are experiencing taxation without representation. Especially if Trump decides to pay for the wall using the Bush law. I think that might be the grounds for the legal action. But ultimately, here's the thing. If in this country, a vast majority of people voted this way, then you go about, okay, my moral argument fell apart. I need to start making a conversation. I got to start, articulating my message better. But when you actually get more votes, and find a permanent usurpation of constitutional power of the Supreme Court leveraged during Jefferson's time, read the great decision about Marbury versus Madison. It's fascinating. Will do, Carl. Thank you. If you can make the case that voting rights denied anyone, or voting rights denied everyone, because if the tide of politics doesn't go my way as far as bills getting enacted because a majority of people in the country believe that's one thing. But if the majority of human beings in the country voted another way, and yet policies are being enacted based on a structure that is about vote denial, meaning the Electoral College and certain people who weren't, able to vote, then that is taxation without representation. It's illegal. That would be the argument. So, anyways, we'll see how we can play that part of it out. I think it's a necessity. I think, and ultimately, like I said, if it turned out that the vote was changed and the vast majority of people voted the other way, then it would be my responsibility as an entertainer, as a voice, as a person on the radio, to change people's minds and try to get them to understand my point of view politically or whatever. But that isn't the case. What's happening right now is that 3 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton than voted for Donald Trump, and yet he's in office. And that a lot of people across the country in areas where the Electoral College was drastically affected were denied the right to vote through undue burden. And again, if you're going to win because you won, not because you denied other people the ability to play in the first place. That's effectively it. Then we'll talk later about the Australian system of forcing people to vote or pay a fine or write a letter as to why they're not voting. Participate in friggin' democracy. I love America. That's why I'm going to hold up here on my hilltop with my sawed-off shotgun and just hide. And if anybody comes up here with a badge, I'm going to shoot them in the name of America and against a tyrannical government. Forget it. The great decision, Jefferson, Adams, Marshall, the battle for the Supreme Court. Will do, Carl. That's great. Anyways, that's it. I'm signing off. You guys are awesome. I got to go rest my throat a little bit because I'm not only doing a stand-up show tonight, but I've got to sing this week. More details to come. It's not quite not a total secret, but kind of I'll have an announcement about that soon. And be well. And then the night of the inauguration and the day after, I'm performing in D.C. If anybody's in that area, I'll be doing stand-up at the Arlington Cinema Draft House. And then that's my last stand-up. I think I only have one other stand-up date between now and like March in February. So the rest of the time I'm here working, writing, and shooting for some new projects that I'm doing that will eventually, see the light of day. I'm excited. But either way, thank you guys for joining me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It's just terrific. You guys joining in every week. It really means a lot. So, Carl, I will be at the Ice House sometime, maybe end of February, beginning of March. I'm trying to do all in-state shows because I've got so much stuff to do here over the next couple months. So I don't want to be out on the road all the time because it's, while I love it, it's a distraction when I'm in the middle of another project. So, but either way, you guys are awesome. I'll talk to you later. Be well. See you next time. Bye-bye.